Welcome! In this video, we're going to cover a Looker Studio tutorial for beginners. Looker Studio is a data visualization tool that you can use to create dashboards and reports. It helps you do a couple things. One, manage data sources, bring data sources together so you can pull from those data sources. Two, analyze and create dashboarding and reporting assets to help you uncover insights from your data. And number three, it helps you share and democratize data. Share your reports, your dashboards, so others on your team, other stakeholders can look at those data assets. If you have a Google account, go to lookerstudio.google.com and you'll be brought to this dashboard homepage. So if you're just starting out with Looker Studio, if you're brand new, you probably won't have any existing reports unless someone shared something with you. So what you can do is you can either create a new report from scratch or use a template here. In the left navigation, you'll see recent reports that you've accessed, any reports that's been shared with you, reports that you own, the trash bin, and a tab for templates here too. In the top here, you can see reports, data sources, any data sources that you've connected, and this Explore tab, which if you're familiar with Google Analytics 4, is a quick way to analyze and perform any ad hoc analysis. There's also a search bar that you can use to search for specific reports. We'll cover how to create a Looker Studio report from scratch and how to create a report using a template. So first, we'll click on this big Create button, and you can see what kind of asset you want to create here. We'll click on Report, and this will load a blank report here. So from here, you'll have to add a data source to your report. And if you scroll down, you can see all kinds of connectors for various data sources. You can search for them, or you can look at any existing data sources that you have. We're going to choose Google Analytics for our example and select the account and then the property that you want to connect. In order for you to connect to a Google Analytics property, you have to make sure that you have access and the proper credentials for that Google Analytics property. Once you've selected your GA property, click on Add in the lower right corner, and then a modal will pop up. So to confirm this, click Add to Report. And you can see that it's given us a starting asset in the form of a table here. But before we take a closer look at this table, we'll look through the menu, the toolbar, and configuration settings. Most of the items that you'll probably find useful from the menu can be found either in the toolbar here or in the upper right corner with these buttons. But I'll call out a few items from the menu, including version history, where you can view previous versions of your report, and this option to download the report as a PDF. If you want to email it as a PDF or if you want to print it out, that's a good option there. There's also this page menu where you can configure the page settings. And if you click on Style, you can change the dimensions of the page, you can change the size, as well as the background, and add a data source or configure some filters or date range dimension. There's also this Arrange drop down where you can order a specific widget. You can bring it to the front or you can move it to the back. if you want to layer elements on your report. And when you create widgets for your report, when you create assets, you can also make them on every page of the report by clicking Make Report Level. You can also reverse the setting, so remove them and just save this widget only for a certain page by making it page level. And if you want to group certain widgets together or ungroup them, where you can click and drag them together, or if you want to group a filter with specific reporting elements, you can use the group option here. And then there's the resource dropdown, where you can manage different data sources, where you can blend different data sources together. You can manage your segments, filters, and other settings for the report. And in the toolbar, there's the undo, redo button. You can zoom, add a page, add data source, add various elements to the chart, including table, scorecard, time series, chart, bar chart, pie chart, maps, line charts, area charts, scatter plots, pivot tables, bullet charts, tree maps, and gauge charts. You can explore different community visualizations or different tools. You can also check out the community gallery here to see if there are any elements that you want to add. You can add controls for drop-down lists, fixed size lists, advanced filters, date range control, data control, and some other features here. You can use this URL embed if you want to add a URL here. You can include an image, text, add lines, and add various shapes. There's also a theme and layout configuration area where you can choose the theme. You have these pre-made themes available, but you can also customize the different colors for your themes as well. So you can customize all these components for your themes. If you click on the Layout tab, you can configure various elements here. For example, navigation. You can choose where you want the navigation to live. You can also configure the canvas size here as well. If you have an element or a widget in your report, you'll have this panel on the right where you'll have one for data sources and your dimensions and metrics. You can create fields or add parameters or add another data source. And then there's a panel for the properties of the element or the chart. In this panel for properties, you have the setup where it identifies the data source, and you can blend this data source with another data source. You have your dimensions, your metrics, rows per page depending on what kind of chart you have. You can sort the element or the widget. You can also create a date range, a default date range, as well as adding a filter or cross-filtering whenever you engage or whenever a user engages with that element on the chart. So that means if your widget gives you the ability to highlight some data, for example, then it'll update all the other charts on that page as well. An important item to highlight is if you're using Google Analytics, you might know that Google Analytics gives you a certain number of tokens that you can use for reports. So to see how many tokens you've used to see your token usage, you can either click on these three dots where it says more, or right click on the widget and click Google Analytics token usage. So you can click on the report or look at the component here to see your token usage. The report gives you a more detailed report, and you can see the remaining amount of tokens that you have left here. That's something you want to keep an eye on if you have a large team that's interested in GA4 data. You want to make sure you keep an eye on the token usage, that you're within the limit for each day. Otherwise, your report will stop working. Let's rename this report. Name it something meaningful so you can include the data source and or the project that you're working on. So we can call this Digital Sandbox Traffic Report or User Behavior. Before we get into details about the widgets creating elements for this report, let's look at another way to create a report, and that is using a template. It's a great way to start off because you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you can just use something that's already been done and adjust what you need to. So let's go back to the Looker Studio homepage and take a look at the templates here. So you can take a look at the template gallery, click to expand that, or just click on this left navigation item. You can view templates by category according to various data sources, or you can browse through each of these sections here. So we'll look at the Google Analytics section. If you expand it, you can see these different reports. You can click on any of these to preview them and decide whether you want to use it or not. If you want to use it, you can use your own data for this report or click on Edit and Share. So we can also preview this data using all the data sources that we have available. If you have a Google Analytics account associated with your Google account. They also have templates for BigQuery, YouTube, Google Ads, Search Console, and other data sources. But we'll use a template from Google Analytics. And we'll choose the Audience Overview Report. So we'll click on Use My Own Data here. But before we do that, let's scroll through, see what it looks like. Click on Use My Own Data, and we'll choose the account that we want to use. And click Add. And then confirm that we want to add this to the report, add that data source. Once the edit mode fully loads, and this is applicable whether you're starting from scratch or you're using a report template. If you want to manage your data source across all your reporting elements and not just a single reporting element, click on Resource from the top menu and select Manage Added Data Sources. This will bring up a list of all your data sources, and from here you can also add a data source, or you can edit, you can duplicate, you can remove the data source. If you click on edit, it just brings up this familiar screen with all your dimensions and metrics. Again, you can edit the connection, reconnect the data source, or configure any of these other settings for the data source. Now you can also add a data control for the whole page of this report or dashboard. The way you do that is select Add Control from the toolbar up here. You'll see this drop down and click Data Control. Now you can click to add this data control at the top, and you'll see the settings appear on the right. So you can select the connector type and also the dataset type. So we'll keep it on Google Analytics. And for Google Analytics specifically, you have the option to choose from Universal Analytics or Google Analytics 4. And when you click on this data control, you'll see all the Google Analytics properties that you have available. So you can change the data source for the entire page. So that includes all the scorecards, the charts, the data tables, whatever widgets, whatever reporting elements you have on this page. Just remember, if you're switching from Google Analytics 4 to Universal Analytics or vice versa, you have to configure or reconfigure the reporting elements because the dimensions and the metrics are different. As an example, we'll set this to Google Analytics 4, click on the drop down, and we'll choose one of the Digital Learning Sandbox Google Analytics 4 properties. So once we select that, the entire page will change, and you can see the data has been updated. And this is how the data control will function in the view mode. So I'm going to change this back. So you can leverage this data control if you want to use a specific reporting template or dashboard template for multiple GA properties. That way, when you want to create a report for another property, you don't have to copy this report and change each reporting element one by one. Instead, when you copy it, you can just select the GA property that you want, and you'll have the data updated automatically. Now let's give our dashboard or report some substance. And we can model our format, our layout, off of the templates that we have or the actual reports in GA4. If you notice a couple things about these reports and templates, each of them have a header that includes the title, a date selector, and some features that allow you to filter or add comparisons. We'll go back to our report, move this table out of the way, and we'll add ourselves a little header. So what we can do here is create a space or create a divider. So we can use a rectangle for the header itself, or you can use it as a separator. And in the upper left corner, you can add an image for your logo. You can upload an image from your computer or link by a URL. We'll put this logo in the upper left corner here. And then we'll add a text box at the top here, drag it across. We'll change the font size to 40, change the font. And then we'll add a data control. For this data control, for the setup, in the property column here, change it from Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4. And let's actually change the font size so we can give our data control more space. Just as GA4 allows you to create comparisons and filters, change the date range at the top, we're going to do the same just beneath the header at the top of the report. So we'll click on Add Control here and choose Drop Down List. And we'll only create a few here, and these will be Session Default Channel Grouping. We'll change the settings and the style a bit. Let's change this to Sessions, and then click on the Style tab. We'll change the text size to 18. Scroll down and change the border radius. Let's add some border radius. We'll add 3, and let's change the size here. And then we can take this, copy and paste, and we'll create another control for device category. If a geographic dimension is important to you, you can add one for country, region, or whatever you please. And then we'll add another control for the date range. So for the default date range, we'll just select the last 30 days, click on Apply, and then change the style to match the other controls. Then we'll just even these up. Some other great elements to add at the top here are scorecards for KPIs, your key performance indicators. That way, as long as you have benchmarks, you or your audience can tell immediately whether your efforts have been successful. So we'll click on Add a Chart, and we'll choose Scorecard. There are two types. You can choose one with compact numbers where there's a significant digit, or you can just choose a general one. So we'll drag one here, and for this one we'll use the metrics new user. We can use a comparison. You can choose something like the previous period or the previous year, especially if your website or your audience has a seasonality element to it. So we'll go to Style. We'll change the font size in the label section here to 36. And add a border radius again to 3. And then we'll just resize this and copy and paste. For this setup here, we'll change this metric to sessions. We'll create another one. We'll turn this one into engagement rate. And just my personal preference, I'm going to change the decimal precision to 1, just to clean that up a bit. And for the next scorecard, let's turn this one into conversions. We're going to go to Style and change the decimal precision so that it's a whole number. And for the last scorecard, we're going to create one for conversion rate. If you search for the metric, you won't find a conversion rate. So what we'll have to do is actually blend two scorecards that we have. So we'll calculate conversion rate dividing conversions by the number of sessions. So make sure you select conversions first, the number that'll be in your numerator of the fraction, and then select sessions, which will be your denominator. But when you select it, make sure you select Control so that you can keep both selected at the same time. And once they're both highlighted, right click and go down to Blend Data. So now this will calculate your conversion rate, and you can rename the metric as such and click on Apply. And then we'll change the decimal precision to match the other percentage go back to setup and add a comparison date range for the previous year to match the other scorecards. Let's cover the differences between a line chart and a time series chart. So if you click on this chart here, it's actually a time series chart, but you'll see options to change the chart. So of course, we're using a time series chart here, and there's also an option to choose a line chart. If you take a look at the configuration settings for a line chart that you have in Data Studio, or if you look at one of the templates that's available in Data Studio and compare the settings for a line chart and a time series chart, they're actually very similar. And I'm talking about what you will find in the data settings as well as the style settings. So what are the differences? Well, for a line chart, you can use any type of dimension for the x-axis. And of course, for a time series chart, since the data is relative to time, the x-axis will display the date or the time dimension. For example, the actual date, the day of the week, hour, minute, month, etc. Another difference between a line chart and a time series chart is if the x-axis is missing data, then the line chart will display a gap. For a time series chart, it'll show a continuous x-axis with all of the dates, but it'll give you options on how you can handle the missing data. So for example, you can bring the line down all the way to 0. Like if you're missing data for October 30th, you can just bring the line all the way down to 0, and then it'll pop back up when there is data for the next available date. Or you can do something like include an interpolation of the data, which will show you what the data might look like if there was actually data there. Now, you can also limit the number of data points on a line chart, but for a time series chart, it'll just give you all of the data for the date range that you specified. The last difference is line charts won't display trend lines, whereas time series charts will. So let's go ahead and we'll actually recreate this chart right here. And I'll show you the different ways by using a line chart and then a time series chart. So what I've done is using this Data Studio template, I've actually copied this page. So we'll go to the page that I've copied, and then I'll click on Add Chart at the top for this drop down, and then select Line. And I will create a space for this line chart. Wait for that to load. And we'll see that it's given us a dimension for region and a metric for average time on page by default. So we'll click on region and change this dimension to date. And then select the appropriate dimension and then click on average time on page. And we'll choose page view. And then another metric for unique page views. So we'll select that metric, and you'll notice that the line chart shows us the page view and unique page view data in descending order. So it starts on the left with the date that has the most page views, and then it ranges the dates on the x-axis until the last data point where it has the least amount of page views. So what we'll do is go to the sort section in the configuration settings, click on page views, and then sort by date. And we'll choose ascending order. So then this looks pretty much the same as this time series chart. So October 19th, we have this spike here. And if we look at our chart, we have a similar spike, or we have the same spike on the same day. So you can scroll down and add any filters, segments. Now this is for segments that come from Google Analytics. But you can create these filters, change the date range, and add any additional metrics, optional metrics. For example, we can actually turn the unique page view metric into an optional metric if we want. And what this does is, if you remove unique page views from the metrics section, then by default, it'll only show the page view metric and hide the unique page views. But the viewer will be able to toggle a setting where they can select unique page views if they want to view them together. Let's look at the style section in the configuration settings, and we can see these different sections here. So you have the option to select whether you want to see the data accumulate across time, and this will give you a different view where you'll see the number of page views just rise over time. You can also elect to select whether you want to display points or data labels. I'm not going to select these options because, as you'll see, it'll just clutter up the chart. So I usually don't include data points or data labels on my chart. You can also choose if you want to smooth out the lines, and you can also limit the number of data points if you want. We were talking about changing the number of data points. So right now it has the data points for the past 30 days. Now, if we wanted to limit that manually, no matter what the date range is that the user selects, it'll always show the number of points that you set it to. So when we do that, it changes the chart, the x-axis, to only show the dates, the number of days for the number of points that we've selected. And if we just change that back to what it was before, then we'll go back to the original chart. In the next section, we have the settings for axes. We'll keep this option selected, show axes, because that'll give us a frame of reference for the data. But there's also options to reverse either of the axes. But I'm not going to go with either one of those, and we'll just go on to the next section, which is the left y-axis. Now, I won't choose to show this either because it already has the legend here that indicates what this data is showing us. Now, if we didn't have the legend, then I would choose to show the axis title. And once that loads, it'll give us the page views, which is the metric that we chose in the data section. So you can also choose a minimum and a maximum, as well as an interval. And you can choose whether you want to show an axis title for the x-axis. But that's not necessary, and we can just keep it clean since we know that these x-axis labels are dates. The next section is the grid settings. So this first icon here is the axis color. If you want to change the color for the axis, you can do so, but we'll just keep it with the default, and this icon will change the color of the grid. So right now it's this light gray color, but I kind of want to simplify this a little more and choose an even lighter color so that it's not as noticeable. So the viewer can still see it if they do want to try to figure out, where these data points lie on the axis. But there's also this hover function, which allows the viewer to see specific data points. So you can choose to make the grid transparent if you like. Then of course you can change the other settings such as font size, label font size, but since we don't have data labels, that's not applicable to us. You can also change the background and the border. And here's the section to adjust the legend. So as I mentioned before, if you want to display the title for the y-axis, you can remove the legend. So that just cleans things up a bit. That also gives you a little bit more space for the chart, or you can actually move the legend if you like. But I'm just going to keep it at the top here. And then you can adjust the alignment and the number of lines as well. Now for the chart header, what this is referring to is this little header bar with these options. So that includes the optional metrics as we looked at earlier, and then another toggle setting for the sort function. So if we wanted to sort the data by some other means, for example, if we wanted to sort by page views where we can see it in descending order, then we can change that if we like. Now we'll take a look at a time series chart. So if you're creating a time series chart from scratch, go back to this drop down, add a chart at the top, and you can select the option for time series. But if you want to convert an existing chart, you can select this drop down on the right side and then click on the time series chart option. So if we go through the configuration settings, we can see that everything looks pretty similar. So there's the date dimension, there's our page views, and we can again add optional metrics. So you can click on add a metric and select unique page views again. But before we do that, there's actually an option to use metric sliders. So if you toggle that on, I'll just show you what that looks like. And it kind of acts as a filter for the number of page views that you want to see. So if you increase the floor for the number of page views, you'll see that it won't display data for certain dates. So it's not that useful for a line chart nor for a time series chart. So we'll go back and turn this off and then add our unique page views again. Click on add metric, and once that shows up, look for unique page views. Now for the date range, what you'll notice here is it actually gives you an option for comparison, a comparison date range. So if you keep this on auto, then the date range will just match this date filter here. So you'll need to make sure that you have a date filter created for the page. But for the comparison date range, what you can do is if you select on the drop down, it gives you several options. So you can choose a fixed date range. You can choose the previous period. So for example, since we're looking at the past 30 days here, it'll just compare this data to the 30 days before this date range. Or you can select a comparison for a previous year, or choose the advanced option where you can also specify certain days. Generally, it makes sense to select previous year because many websites depend on seasonality when it comes to the number of page views and unique page views. So you can apply that setting and it'll give us another line for the previous year. So we have the dark color for the past 30 days and then the lighter color for the page views from the previous year. So these other settings are similar as well. And if we click on style, we can look at the settings here. So again, we have these settings, including cumulative, show points, show data labels, and we also have this trend line option, which we can add if we want to. And again, this wasn't available for the line chart. You can add a reference line if you like. You can customize this, whether you want a reference line based on a metric or a parameter. So right now the reference line is set to 0, but we're going to remove that because we don't really, right now, we don't have the intention to compare it to an average or something like that. So if you had an average number of sales, for example, or if you want to meet a specific number for page views or unique page views, number of sales or revenue, you can use that as a reference line. And then in this general section, here's how you can handle the missing data. So by default, it'll bring the data to 0. But in this dropdown, you can also see that you have the option to break the line. So it'll show a gap between the line, or you can use linear interpolation, which will show you what the data would probably look like if there was data for those missing data points. So if we keep going, we have the same settings as we did for the line chart with the x-axis and y-axis. So you can configure the settings for those respective axes. Again, there's also the sections for the grid, background and border, legend, and chart header. And there's actually a really useful feature for the header. And if you go back to data, under chart interactions, this is the last section at the bottom of the data settings. Toggle this cross filtering on. And what you'll see is this icon appear where you can actually select the range in the time series chart. And what that does is it'll actually highlight the range that you selected and update the rest of the charts on the page. So for this chart, next to it, it highlights the same date range, and then it provides the data for the same date range for the rest of these charts. If you want to show all data points again, just click anywhere on the chart and it'll bring back all the data points. Now, what we're going to do is move this unique page views metric into the main metric section so that we can configure the lines for each of these metrics. So let's add unique page views in there, and then we'll go to the style section. So what we'll do is for the first series, which is the first metric that we added, and that's page views, we'll change the color to match the other charts. So we'll select this orange, and if you look closely, you can see the weight of the line is a bit thinner than the lines on this other chart. So what we can do is select the dropdown for this line weight and change it to 3, and that'll match the weight for this other line here. And then for the second series, which is unique page views, let's change the line weight again to 3, and we'll change the color to this so it's consistent with the other charts. So that's how you can change the settings for the lines. And we'll scroll back down, change the color for the grid to something lighter. Wait for that to update. And you can change the rest of the charts to match the same if you like. But one thing I want to point out is that on the x-axis, you'll see that's a little cleaner than what you have for a line chart. So for the line chart, on the x-axis, if you remember, it uses a date format that's a bit more long form and takes up more space. Now let's cover an example on creating a table. I'm going to click on Add a Chart, and we'll add just this table here. Select the area where we want the table to cover. Adjust this a little bit, and then for the dimension, we'll click on the dimension and then type in session default channel grouping. And we'll just make sure that our data source is GA4. I'm going to go to Style and remove the row numbers. Go back to the data section. And then for the metrics, so first we'll add sessions, and I'll do that quickly. And then add the other metrics. So for this views per session metric, we're going to create a field here, and we'll type in views divided by sessions number. That'll work fine. And we'll click on apply. So now we have the table configured, and we're going to go back to our data section, and then in the dimension area we're going to switch this toggle for drill down on, and we'll add a dimension and type in source. So now when you select a channel grouping and you right click, drill down into it, so we're looking at organic social here, and we'll see all the social media sources. So Facebook, Reddit, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, and all these other social media, organic social media referral sites. Now let's look at configuring a donut chart or a pie chart. From the toolbar up here, add a chart and choose the pie chart or the donut chart icon. And when you do that, you would just drag and select the area where you want to add the chart. So we have this donut chart here. Make sure we're in data. Make sure our source is correct for our Google Analytics 4. Click on the dimension and type in source. Toggle the drill down off. For the metric, we'll type in sessions, and now it'll show us what percentages, how the traffic is divided up among the sources. So this chart, this donut chart, shows us 10 slices, and that looks okay. So we'll change this title to social media source traffic sources. You can also create a bar chart with this data. So if you're creating this from scratch, you would click on add a chart up here and select the horizontal bar chart. But since we already have this time series chart, we're going to change the option with this drop down and select the bar chart here. Collapse that area, and for the dimension, we'll change this from date to source. We'll get rid of the breakdown dimension. Active users, that works. Click on style, and since we're only using active users for the metric and the source for the dimension, we'll get rid of the legend and change the title to indicate what this chart is showing. So we can call it social media traffic by active users. Click on this chart area, and then we can change the width so that we can actually read the axis labels. And now we can see which social media network gives your web property the most traffic. Another chart we can use is the stacked area chart. Again, if you want to create it from scratch, you can choose it from this added chart drop down, but we're going to choose the option in our configuration area here. There's a 100% stacked area chart, and we want this 100% stacking, so this only shows us the social media traffic. So this is 100% of our social media traffic, and you can see which days has the most. For example, on March 11th, we see that sites.google.com had 37% of social media traffic, while Facebook, with the 3 different subdomains combined, looks like it had almost 50% of social media traffic. Of course, you can change the title to social media traffic share by source. For this Google Merchandise Store report, so if you see here, there's a couple tables down here and a couple charts that we'll use in our examples. And if you click on one of these tables, we can look at the settings. If we keep scrolling down the data settings, we'll come across 2 sections for sort. One is the primary sort and the other is the secondary sort. So right now, the primary sort is set to sort according to revenue in descending order. And you can see in this table here, there's a little down arrow indicating what type of sort it is for the revenue metric. We can look at another example with this table here. Just so we can see the primary sort and the secondary sort in action, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on Style, and for the average quantity column, so that's the last column here, I'm going to change the auto precision to 1. So that way we have some product categories that are more likely to have the same value. And I'm going to go back to data and then click on the primary sort metric and look up average quantity. So now we have these values here, and then I'm going to add a secondary sort for unique purchases. So if you look closely, you can see these columns marked with a 1 and a 2. And this 1 indicates our primary sort metric, and the 2, of course, represents our secondary sort metric. Now there are only 5 values here, and so I'm going to click on rows per page and select 10 to expand our list. And if we scroll down, okay, here we can see that we have 2 product categories that have the same value. And as you'll notice, our secondary sort comes into play where this product category, the clearance one, is above the drinkware product category because the secondary feature or the secondary sort is going to work here. You can also sort by another metric that's not in the table, but unless you have a note there or unless the end user knows exactly by which metric the table is sorted by, that might not make too much sense. But just to show you that you can do it, I'm just going to type in product list, click, and it'll update the table as you saw there. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I'm going to change this back to average quantity. Now let's move on to using the sort function for charts. So I have this stack bar chart down here, and it looks like Data Studio is a bit buggy with the alignment for the axis and the legends, labels. But anyway, if we look in our data settings, we can see that this table, which shows us the engagement for the top product categories, as we're looking at product detail views and quantity purchased, in the primary sort metric, we can see that we're using product detail views. And it's in descending order. If you keep scrolling down, you'll see the section Chart Interactions. And here we have this change sorting enabled. So this will allow the end user, the viewer, to change the metric by which the table will be sorted by if they want to. You can also use sorting feature for pie charts. So let's take a look at this in action. So we'll click on View at the top of the page, and the table here we have our metrics that we're sorting by, 1 and 2. And what you can also do is click on any other metric column to sort by that metric. So I clicked on product revenue, but when you click on that metric, it'll only allow you to sort that as a primary sort metric. So that's why we have only the product revenue sorted and none of the other metrics. And if we go down to our charts here, so right now, of course, the chart is sorted by product detail views, but since we enabled the change sorting feature for this chart, we can change the table to sort it by quantity purchased. So let's click on this sort icon here, the AZ with the up-down arrows, and let's click on, well, let's take a look at the options we have available. So product detail views, we have the option to change the sort to by ascending instead of descending, as it indicates the current status. We can also change it to quantity purchase by descending order, or we can change it to product category where it'll sort by alphabetical order. So if we change it to quantity purchased, here's what that looks like. So the product categories are sorted accordingly, but it's a bit difficult to discern how it's sorted because quantity purchased is the green metric or the second metric listed in our edit mode. Now we can also change it to sort by product category, and as you can see, it's sorting the product categories in descending order or reverse alphabetical order. But you can also change it back or change it to alphabetical order, or if we go back to quantity purchased, we can also change that to ascending order as well. But let's go back and change it to product detail views, and we can do the same, change it to ascending order, and that's what the charts look like. If you click on the 3 dots to view the options available for this table, you can also sort using this menu, and it's the same sort functions as the sort icon that we were just looking at, but more importantly, you can use this menu to reset the table. Now let's say you want this table to only show social media traffic, so we're going to get rid of all the other default channel groupings and we'll only have the social media traffic. What we're going to do is scroll down to filters in the data section and click on add a filter, and we'll call this social media traffic. Include, select a field, we'll type in default session default channel grouping equal to, or let's include contains social, and we can check this filter to see what it will show. Okay, organic social, that's what we want. Now if there was paid social traffic, that would also be included, but since there's not, it's only organic social. And instead of requiring the user to drill down, we're just going to get rid of the session default channel grouping dimension and just leave the source. And then we'll toggle this drill down option off. So now, by default, it'll just list the social media traffic sources. We are going to cover one of my favorite features in Data Studio, and that is the drill down feature. This feature allows users to drill down or up, or you could say zoom in or out of your data. We often deal with data sets that either have a hierarchy or have a structure with categories and subcategories. Examples might include geographical or location data. Let's go through configuring the drill down feature for charts and tables. Keep in mind that not all elements in Data Studio will allow you to enable the drill down feature. When you're configuring your chart or table, there's an indicator that'll tell you whether you can enable drill down. So for example, this geo chart here allows us the option to use the drill down feature. Tables, you can actually mix and match various dimensions for drill down use. So for example, instead of all these geolocation dimensions, you can actually add a dimension like device category. But for elements such as these scorecards, it doesn't give us the option to use drill down. Let's work through creating some of these charts and tables with the drill down feature. We'll start off by recreating this map chart and then a table for browser and browser versions, because you want to create an experience for your audience that's most optimal for the browser and browser versions that they're using. So I'm going to actually create this from scratch so you can see how we can do this. So I'll name this section browser breakdown. In this chart, I'm going to delete this table here, and I'm going to click on add a chart and choose geochart, and then place it here in this section. Move it over a bit, and we'll look at the chart settings here. So if we look under the geo settings or the geo dimension settings, the dimension that it's using is continent, and there's an option here for drill down. So we'll slide that toggle over, and it automatically gives you some dimensions that suit or that fall under the geo dimension here. So we can add another dimension for region, and we'll place that above city. So if you're in the US, that'll give you states, and then we'll look at the metric here for page views, and we'll change that to users. So scroll down, find users. We'll add another item here, and this time we'll select a table. So for this table, we'll create the size, wait for it to load, and instead of continent for the dimension, we'll look for browser. Enable the drill down feature, click on add dimension, and this time search for browser version. Take a look at this in action. So if we engage with this map here, you can click the down arrow and it will drill down into the countries. So you hover over the subcontinent, which was the level, the dimension below continent. So if you actually hover over some of these other areas here, you can see South America, Central America as these subcontinent regions. But another way you can drill down is by right-clicking on an area, and you can either drill up, reset, or continue drilling down. So let's do that. So then it breaks down the map by countries, and you can hover over and see the breakdown for each country. And it's difficult to see, but with this chart, there's this icon here that allows you to reset as well. But before that, we'll just drill up so we can see how that works. And it goes back to the previous level of dimension that we were looking at. Let's just click reset, and it resets everything to what it was initially. Now for the browser table, there are a few ways that you can drill down into the browsers here. One is you can drill down into all the browser versions for each line item in this table as a whole. So if you drill down this way, it'll just give you a list of all the browser versions, but it won't give you which browser it's associated with. Now this might be applicable to some other dimensions, but I'll just show you how this works. So you can do this by simply clicking on the down arrow, and it'll give you all the different browser versions and the number of page views, the number of unique page views for each. So Let's just remember this number. The fourth row, the browser version is 14.1.2. And if we drill back up, what you can do is right click on the table, anywhere on the table, and just click drill down. And it gives us the same drill down table that we were just looking at when we clicked the down arrow. So here's our fourth row, our fourth line item here, 14.1.2. Now, if you only want to drill down into one of these browsers or one of these line items, what you have to do is select that line item so that it's highlighted here, and then you can either click the down arrow, and so you can see that 14.1.2 is removed, and it only gives us these browser versions that start with 90 something, 80 something, 70 something, and you can drill back up. So that was how you can drill down, by clicking on the down arrow, but you can also right click on this line item once it's highlighted and select drill down so that it'll give you the same data. So we're just going to reset that table. And the other way you can drill down into this table is by clicking on the three dots here. So you can select drill down from this menu as well. And this is available for the chart as well. And what I want to do is show you the default dimension that it starts with. So whenever you press reset, then it'll go back to this default drill down level. So for this chart, the default drill down level is continent. If you remember when we clicked on reset, it just reset the chart to show the metrics, the number of users at the continent level. And it works the same for tables as well. So right now, the default drill down level for this browser table is in fact browser. So for example, if we click on this map chart, we can set the default drill down level to country if we wanted to. So then whenever you reset this chart, it'll show the number of users at the country level. We'll cover how to create, edit, and manage pages in the edit mode, and how this will affect the view mode when your users or your target audience actually view the report or dashboard. Right in this navigation area at the top here, where it indicates what page you're editing for your report. So if you hover over it, it says that you can click on it to manage pages. And when you click on it, this section on the right for report pages, it tells you what pages you have in your report. So you can quickly navigate to each page if you don't want to use these arrows to go back and forth between pages. So there are a couple things that you can do in order to manage the pages here. You see this plus sign at the bottom here. If you click on the plus sign, you will add a page. You also have the option to click on page, and that serves as the same function. So just be careful when you hover over this plus sign. If you actually click on it, it'll add another page. So you can click on that, and it gives us a brand new page, labels it untitled. So from there, you can rename it to whatever you want. Example page. And then you can choose whether you want to duplicate specific pages, whether you want to delete, hide them in the actual view mode. So this way, it's only visible to you as an editor, and your end users won't be able to see this page. You can select an icon. We'll go over that in detail, and you can also move the arrangement, move the page to whatever order you feel like is appropriate. I'm going to go ahead and delete this page and just work with the pages that we already have here. So the pages that we have, they all have Google Analytics as a data source. So if we hover over the plus sign again, we can take a look at the options. Once again, there's the page. You can create a new page here. There's the section option. If you click on this, it'll give you a brand new section. And you can see if you hover over different pages or different sections, you're given the option to the left of the titles here to move those pages or sections up or down. So if you click on the three dots on the right, you also have similar options where you can rename, delete, hide in the view mode, or select an icon, add a page to the specific sections. Let's call this audience, since we have 2 pages for audience. And then we'll create another section for behavior. And let's rename it to behavior. So now that we have our new sections, we can move pages into the appropriate sections. So we can do that for this audience overview page and drag it underneath the audience section, and do the same for GA4 audience overview. Make sure the section expands so you can see that it moves the page into the correct place. And we'll do the same for behavior overview. And now we have all our pages in the appropriate section. Let's click on the 3 dots, and for each section we can actually add an icon. And icons only work for top level elements, so that includes sections, top level sections, and pages. So if you have pages within sections, then those won't have icons, and you'll see this in a minute. So for audience, let's select this account circle. It's misspelled here, but we can apply it, and we see that our icon has been applied. And actually, if you add another page, so let's move this element page outside of the audience section, and you can see this page icon appear. So if we change it just to give you an idea of how this works, how the icons work. So there's our page there, and we will actually go ahead and delete this. If you look at the sections here, you'll notice that each section has their own arrows. So you can use these to either collapse or expand your sections. And then if you want, you can move sections up and down. So it just switched the order of these sections, but we're going to keep audience at the top, and you can do the same with pages. We can move this one down so it switches the order, but we'll also move it to the top again. So that's how you can rearrange the order of the pages or the sections. So let's go back here and add another page. Drag this outside of each section. Then we can see that we have these other options to add a divider or a header. If you want a physical divider for each of your sections, you can also add a header. So you can move those elements in between whatever pages or sections you want. So even though they're enabled when you have a page outside of the section, you can still move these elements in between either pages or sections in this area. I'm going to drag this divider in between those sections, and then I'm going to drag the header to the top here. And for this header, I'm going to rename it Merchandise Store Website. So these sections of the report, you can see, or the viewer will be able to see, that those sections deal with the website properties of our organization. So you can also create another header, for example, that focuses on social media, as long as you have a flow that you think works for your target audience. Now let's take a look at how this actually looks in the view mode. So click on View up here, and we can see in our left navigation, this is our header, a merchandise store website. It's actually smaller than the section headers. Maybe they'll change that in the future, but these are our report sections. So we can click on audience to expand that, click on it again to collapse. But let's expand all our sections, and then we can click on audience overview, and this will load that report. We can click on the next page, GA4 audience overview, behavior overview, and then this is the page that we created, and then there's our social media header with nothing underneath there. You can collapse it if you want, and you can just use these icons, these sections to navigate the report, and it'll open up this left navigation again. So then you can actually view the pages that are in the report or the dashboard. You can change the location of the page navigation by clicking on Theme and Layout in the toolbar, and choose the Layout tab, and you'll see under the View mode there's a navigation type drop down here. So by default it's set to the left as it's shown here, but you can change it to a tab where it'll show at the top, and each of these provides a drop down for the pages in each section here. You can also use top left placement, where it acts more like a drop down menu where you can still expand these sections, but you can also use these arrows to navigate between pages. If you click on this again, it'll remove the tab, and you can still navigate the report using the arrows. If you're satisfied with the way your report looks and you're ready to share it with stakeholders, there are a few ways that you can do this. You have a share button up here along with a drop-down menu. If you click on the share button, you can invite individual people or groups, and you can actually give them specific access. So on the right, there's a drop-down menu. You can set their role to viewer or editor. And once you're ready, you can send that to them, and you can adjust the link settings. So in the unlisted drop-down menu here, you'll see you can restrict the view, make sure it's unlisted, or set it to public so that anyone can access it. So right now, this is set to anyone on the internet with the link can view. You can change that if you want, and then you can copy the link. This is especially useful if your stakeholders don't have a Google account set up. But if you want team members or stakeholders to possess the ability to edit the report, then they need to set up a Google account with their email address. The email address that you use to invite them to view or share this report. You can click on the gear icon up top to prevent editors from changing access or adding new people. You can also disable downloading, printing, and copying for viewers as well. If you click on the drop down, you can also schedule email delivery. So you can determine the frequency which you want this email report to be delivered. You have daily, weekly, monthly options, as well as custom options. You can customize the email message as well. There's also a link report, which we saw from the share button, and you can download the report as well. You can download specific pages, and you can configure additional options, for example, protecting your report with a password as well. In order to embed this into a web page, what you'll do is click on Share drop-down menu and then choose Embed Report. So it's enabled for embedding, and there are two options you can choose. You can embed with this code provided here, or you can just embed the URL, where you would just copy and paste this URL in a field for your website so that it'll just appear on the web page. But we're going to go with the embed code, and it gives you these fields for width and height, and you can adjust those if you want, but we're just going to go with the default just to show you what that looks like. So click on copy to clipboard, and I'm going to go to this website that I have set up with this post, and I'm going to make sure that this is in HTML mode. So you can do this with any website where you can edit the HTML. For example, if you have WordPress and are using a theme that allows you to embed HTML code, then you can use that and just paste your code right here. Before your Data Studio dashboard or report goes live on your website, make sure you have the correct sharing configuration enabled. So go back to Data Studio, and at the top, click on this Share button, and click on Manage Access. And make sure this drop-down reads Anyone with a link can view. By default, it's off, only specific people can access. So make sure you choose the correct option that anyone with the link can view. Otherwise, if it's off, if the sharing access is off, then users who don't have access to the report won't be able to see the dashboard or the report on your web page. And then save it. Since I already have that feature enabled, I'm just going to click close and then go back to my web page here. So we can just preview this, and this is our 600 by 450 Data Studio report. So this is what it looks like, and you can see how it looks on tablet, mobile. Scroll through it, interact with it. Let's just switch this back to desktop and go back to our post. Now for the width, I'm going to change this 600 pixels to 100%. It looks a bit better, taking up more space. And since the height is only 600 pixels, it also gives us a scroll bar here to indicate that there's more content in this report. Let's publish it. Yes, confirm. And then we'll go view the blog. Click on the page. Scroll, yep, the report does scroll down. And there are a couple elements in this bottom toolbar here. So there's a navigation for the page. You click on the previous page or next if you have more pages, or you can use this menu to navigate through the pages in the report. You can also open the report in Google Data Studio, or you can click on the full screen option and then interact with the report this way. Exit out of the full screen if you want. So that's what it looks like. So if you found this useful, please like, comment, subscribe. And if you want more content on digital analytics, including tracking, reporting, analysis, we'll see you in the next episode.